I'm Terry Sanchez. I'm part of the programming staff here, and on behalf of the Newport Beach Public Library, sorry, I feel like I'm ringing. I'll back up. Welcome to this evening's program featuring Nicole Meier and her book, The Second Chance Supper Club. I'd like to thank the Friends of the Library for their generous sponsorship. It is because of the Friends that we're able to offer these local author events. So thank you to the Friends. And wanted to let you know that books will be available for purchase and signing at the conclusion of the program over here. Books are $10. Well, we are very pleased to present our guest author this evening. Nicole Meier is a Southern Californian native. She grew up here in Newport Beach and has since moved to Oregon. So we're really excited that she was able to come back and visit us and present her newest book. The Second Chance Supper Club is her third book. It centers around two sisters, Ginny and Julia, and Ginny's daughter, Olive. I loved this book because it was about relationships and family and the complicated relationships of family sometimes, and it was about food. And Nicole has such a way with words. Every time I picked it up to read it, I was hungry. Just the way that she described every dish. I would love to find this supper club somewhere. Her previous books, The House of Bradbury, was chosen as a best book of 2016 by Refinery 29, and she also wrote The Girl Made of Clay. So please join me in welcoming Nicole Meier.
Hi, everyone. So I've been told not to stand in the center because there's a blinding light back there. So can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Wow, this is a great crowd. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Terry, for that lovely introduction. Thank you to the Newport Beach Public Library. And thank you to all of you for being here. I am a board member at my library back home, and I can't tell you guys how much it means to the people that work here for you to show up to things like this. And obviously for the authors too, but just to come to a literary event and to just be part of the community and to support your local branch is a big deal. So thank you all so much. I actually grew up here, as Terry said. I grew up going to elementary school in Newport Beach, and then I went to high school, Corona del Mar. And I grew up with very fond memories of the library system, at my school and also here, just having my little canvas book bag and being so excited to come and fill it for the weekend. I have great memories of that. So it means a lot to be back and see this really, truly beautiful remodel. It's the first time I've been in the remodel, so it's kind of exciting for me. And it just makes my heart happy. Let's see. So as Terry said, I've moved away. I live in Bend, Oregon. I moved away 15 years ago with my family, and we love it there, but I truly enjoy coming back to Newport. This morning I woke up and took a really long walk along Big Corona, and I just felt like I was coming back to the mothership. Just for me to put my feet in the sand and to smell the surf, and it just was a good grounding for today. So you guys live in such a beautiful area, and I know you all know that, but for me, coming back, it just is a good reminder. Okay, so we're going to talk about my third book. It just came out September 10th. I'm really excited to talk about it. And as you can see, the book cover, we'll turn the lights down in a little while. We don't need to turn them down quite yet, but this is the book cover. If you haven't seen it, there's a lot of food on it. And I cannot take credit for these images. So what you're seeing here are images from book bloggers who are on Instagram. And if you don't know this, if you are a book blogger or post about books on Instagram, you are referred to as a bookstagrammer. So we have one in the front row, and she's responsible for that great photo with the lettuce and the vegetables. But I thought it would just be fun to kind of show you what the Instagram community does. They actually love books, and they love to get the book covers and kind of be creative and send out photos. So anyway, that's the book. I'd love to talk about the theme of the book as in addition to the actual story. So for me, the big theme was the power of food and forgiveness. So let's back up a little bit. I'll tell you about the inspiration for the book first. About 2 years ago, I attended an independent film festival in my town, and I watched a documentary about a chef. Excuse me. I know that you guys have a great indie film festival in Newport as well, and there are some foodie films. So some of this might sound familiar. If it does, you can raise your hand. But the movie that I saw was about a chef and his wife who decided to run a speakeasy of sorts out of their apartment in Chicago. He was kind of a type A personality, perfectionist, Michelin star rated chef, and he was fed up with the food industry and the restaurant industry. So he convinced his wife that they were going to run this secret supper club out of their apartment. He ran the back of the house, she ran the front of the house. He was almost like a scientist in the way he approached his food and his menus. And the documentary was fascinating to me for a couple reasons. It was fascinating because first, his life was just fraught with peril, right? So there was so much stress in running a supper club and having strangers come into your home every night, and he was cooking 15-course meals. So, and this is with froth and puree and all kinds of like high-end fare. And his poor wife was trying to do everything she could to just manage the business. Is this sounding familiar to anybody? Okay, wow, this is so exciting. Most people are like, oh, I've seen the movie. So I think the thing that stuck out to me most in the movie was when the cameraman was interviewing the chef on his own one night, and the camera was in his face, and he asked him something about his personal life. And the chef said, "My own family members don't know me nearly as well as my customers." And I just thought, wow, what is that like? This man put his whole life into his work. He had no personal space. There's people in his living room. He had no personal life, no friends, no family except for his spouse. And he was giving everything, but he had lost so much. So I left the theater that day just ferociously taking notes on my phone, and I thought, man, there is a story behind the story there, and I would love to have a secret supper club be the backdrop of my next book. So for anyone that is curious about that film, it's called 42 Grams, and it's on Netflix. And I recommend if you're interested in foodie films. There's a lot of backstory, and I think his wife now lives in Laguna, but it was a crazy, crazy film. So I kind of kept those notes. I let the idea percolate in my head. And I'm going to tell you more about what happened next, but I thought it would be kind of fun to pause and talk about supper clubs. So raise your hand if you've ever been to pop-up dining, a speakeasy, a secret supper club. Okay, this is exciting. Oh, you have? Okay, good. So what it is, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a trend that's growing very rapidly. It started in big cities, and now it's sort of going out into smaller towns. But what happens is you have kind of a high-caliber chef who, like I said, is either really frustrated with the restaurant industry, or he just wants to branch out and do something experimental on his own. So they will do a restaurant in a back room of a real restaurant, in a wine cellar, in a loft apartment, really somewhere where you have to know someone who knows someone to get in. It's usually a very long common table, so strangers all come together for the purpose of just experiencing the food together. It could be a 15-course meal, like I said, and you kind of are at the mercy of whatever the chef wants to cook. There's no, I'm gluten-free at these dinners. You just eat whatever it is. I say that because I'm gluten-free, but it's, to me, the concept is fascinating because it builds community, right? So in this day and age, we don't normally go sit at a common table and eat with people that we don't know. We don't get a chance to have that dialogue with someone who might not have our background or our belief system. And just kind of doing my research, I was so fascinated by how these people are willing to come together and sit at a table all because they share the common love of food. And by the end of the night, they're all friends and it's a fabulous evening. So I thought it'd be fun to look at a few slides. We might need to dim the lights. I love that no one's been to one because it just seems more new. Okay, this is Pith Supper Club. It's at Columbia University. For $15 a person, you get a 5 to 8 course meal with wine pairings in a dorm room. This guy is brilliant. Okay, so since this was actually several years ago, since this dorm room experience, and you can kind of tell, I've seen some other press on him, he was like high-end dining in a teeny tiny space, and people paid to come in there. Little wine, little culinary experience. Since then, he got a lot of press. He graduated from college, and he now, I believe, is a contributing writer to Food and Wine magazine. And he owns his own supper club. It is still called Pith, and it's in his loft apartment in New York City. You have to, with all these supper clubs, you have to go on the website, and there's no address, there's no advertising, there's no reservations. You just kind of leave your name, and they'll get back to you if they feel like it. So. Okay, so this one's in San Diego. So this San Diego resident opens up the terraced backyard of her 75-year-old craftsman home twice a month for food aficionados. And you guys can kind of see what I meant about, can you all see, am I blocking the way? Okay. About the common table. So just inviting people into your backyard, and it's a very cozy, homey feeling. She's there to sort of welcome you into her personal space, take care of you, feed you rich food, and I just love that idea. This name I love, Culinary Hedonism. So this is a supper club also in South County, and it's a way for like-minded foodies to meet and enjoy an evening together. And this is just a picture of the table to give you a sense of every supper club has its own vibe. They have their own decor. They have kind of their own tone that they set. And this one's kind of minimalistic, but I thought it was pretty. Okay, PS Underground. This is in Palm Springs, y'all. So if you go to Palm Springs, you can go. So this one sends curious diners around the Palm Springs area, and this venue, obviously, as you can see, was in a brewery. So if you love beer, that would be really fun. I have to say, I live in Bend, Oregon, and we have a brewery on every street corner, which is amazing and not amazing, because if you've ever walked by a brewery when they're fermenting the hops, the smell is unbearable. So this looks cool, but you might have to hold your nose. Okay. The Shy Chef is a secret supper club in Berlin, Germany. Set up in a residential apartment, diners are also treated to film and art. And I'm sorry this is kind of a dark slide, but this is a more kind of avant-garde, edgy dinner club. It's in a smaller apartment, but it just gives you the flavor that each dinner club is truly unique and has kind of a unique customer with different interests. Okay, Wolf's Den. Has anyone heard of this? Okay, Wolf's Den is in LA. If y'all live in LA, I'm looking at my nephew. This is supposed to be super cool. So Wolf's Den is run by two guys. They've gotten some press recently, and it's literally in a loft apartment. You can tell by the decor that it's kind of an omnivore's delight. There's a lot of taxidermy. But they have gotten press, and I know it's secret. You can find them online, but you'd have to leave your name in order to get reservations. The last I checked, I think their reservations are booked out past Christmas, but it's supposed to be truly amazing. And I heard they're opening a second location called Shark's Tooth, and I'm assuming that means seafood? Don't know. Okay, and then this is Ginny's table. So this is my inspiration for the Second Chance Supper Club. I keep a vision board when I write, so just a bulletin board kind of by my computer. And I always like to refer back to it when I'm writing because I want to remind myself what the tone of the book is. So Ginny is the chef in my book, and this was her table. I imagine this is what her supper club would look like. The supper club is set in Arizona, so you see there's succulents and kind of a rustic element, a little minimalistic, but it just kind of reminded me every time I looked at it, this is what I want her house to look like, this is what I want the diners to see, this is what the table should look like. So we'll talk about the rest of the book now, but we can turn on the lights if you want. That's done. I'm done with my slides. So isn't that cool, all those different supper clubs? Yeah, I really like that. You don't have to clap, but... So truly, most of those were in Southern California. You guys, if you travel around Southern California, look them up and try and get on the list, because that would be kind of a fun adventure. Okay, so I can go in the middle now. Is that light off? Okay. So let's talk about the setting. I mentioned that Ginny's Supper Club is in Arizona. So to me, I love, love, love the desert. I mentioned several times already, I live in Bend, Oregon. We get a lot of snow. So it started snowing, I think, September 1st already this year, and it stayed on the ground. And sometimes we get snow that goes all the way until June. So come the first of the year, I'm done. I need to go somewhere warm and dry out. So I go to Santa Fe, New Mexico, I go to Tucson, Arizona, I go to Palm Desert, California, and I truly think that there's something magical about the desert. I love those sorbet-colored sunsets. I love the foothills when the shadows are dropping. I love the vast expanse of the landscape. I think there's something healing about the desert. At least that's how I see it. So after I watched the movie 42 Grams that I talked about, and I kind of let that idea percolate, I was doing another project, and then I found myself in between books. The trick of it was I was under a 2-book contract with my publisher, and they wanted the books back to back, so I was on an extremely tight timeline. For anyone that's writing a book or wants to write a book, I don't recommend that. It was harrowing, only because the deadline was so incredibly tight. So I sent myself on a sabbatical. So after I finished the first book, I went to Tucson, Arizona, and I stayed up against the mountains. And I don't think most of my girlfriends like to do this, but I like to go on vacation alone. For a writer, it's really important to get quiet, and it's important to unplug all my devices, not have the noise in my head of everyday life, and to just be open and get creative. So I do that in the desert, obviously. So I went to the desert in Arizona, and I thought, gosh, this is the setting for my book. I would love the Supper Club to be in Arizona. So I actually wrote the synopsis to the Second Chance Supper Club while I was there, so beginning, middle, and end. And I sent that to my literary agent, who then sent it on to my publisher. And they liked it, thank goodness, and they said, hurry up and write, which, if anyone knows my publisher, that is the mantra. So I did. I came home and wrote as fast as I could. And I knew I needed a third element. So, right, we've got the Supper Club as the backdrop, we've got Arizona as the setting, but now I need the characters. So, sorry, I feel like I keep shouting into the mic. Will someone tell me if I am? So I knew I wanted this to be a sister's story. All of my books are about family relationships. I come from kind of a big family. I come from a family of fairly strong women, one of them sitting in the front row. And I knew that I wanted to write a relationship that included what would it look like when family members drift apart and come back together. So what better thing to do than to have siblings who aren't getting along to be thrown together and run a supper club? No tension whatsoever. So we have in the book, and Terry kind of mentioned this before, we have 2 sisters. One is Ginny, and she's the chef. She's the older sister. She's a Michelin star-rated chef, and she's in New York City. And then we have her younger sister, Julia, and she is in television broadcast journalism, and she's a little bit obsessed with the idea of success. The sisters have their parents die unexpectedly in an accident, and Ginny decides she's going to uproot her career, uproot her child, and move back home to Arizona to clean up the mess. Julia, however, decides that her career is too important and she's not going to follow suit, so she stays in New York, and the sisters fight, and there's a big rift, and they're estranged for 3 years. So when the book starts, we see Julia. Julia, like I said, is very much obsessed with success, and she is in an industry in broadcast journalism where there is a lot of ageism, a lot of sexism, a lot of straight-up competition. So she starts making some poor decisions in order to get her ratings up, to stay fresh, to stay young, to stay relevant. And unfortunately, she makes a decision where she makes a claim on air on the news, and she accuses the mayor of New York of tax fraud, and it's completely unfounded, but she does it for ratings. So she's immediately pulled off the air and suspended from her job, and she has to tuck tail and leave town. So who does she go turn to for solace? Her sister Ginny. So when she shows up on Ginny's doorstep, she's sort of horrified to know that Ginny's running a semi-illegal business out of her home. And Ginny says, fine, I'll take you, but you have to put this apron on and work at the supper club with no questions asked and no judgment because I've got to keep this business afloat. So Julia has no choice but to say okay. So the rest of the story is about how these two sisters work it out in terms of an actual business, their relationship, and then there's one more character who is Olive, and she's Ginny's 21-year-old daughter who's forced to work in the family business, and she's not happy about it. So the three of them are very strong, and they've made a lot of mistakes, and the rest of the story is about how do they come together, how do they forgive one another, how do they find common ground, and how do they rediscover themselves, because along the way, success has really pulled them away from who they really are. They've lost themselves along the way, I guess. And the food to me was a great sort of vehicle to bring healing to this family. I don't know if anyone in here considers them a foodie or if you cook, but I truly love to just stand at the stove and cook. I love to just simmer a sauce or chop a vegetable, and there's something about that process that's very methodical and calming and soothing and cathartic. And so I wanted there to be a lot of food and a lot of preparation of the food in the book, because I think that this is a way that brought the sisters together. They're cooking, they're putting love into a meal, they're putting that love across the table to strangers who are coming into their home. And again, like you saw with all the slides, there's a big common table. So all these strangers who come into Ginny's home don't know each other in the beginning, but because they keep coming back and they're sitting together, they build community, they build family, and they also start to heal from their own wounds. So I'm trying to think what else I can tell you. Oh, research. Okay, so that was the most fun part. I have to admit that my teenage daughters and I watch a tremendous amount of Food Network. We watch all the competition shows, where they have to bake something in order for a reward or cook something. And that was sort of a good catalyst for me to just remember, okay, the chopping methods and all the things. And then I did a lot of watching of YouTube videos of Michelin star rated chefs online. And that was amazing, and it's stuff that I am, it's way above my pay grade, but just the way they would make a froth and how important all of the little quail eggs and delicate scallops had to be, and it was the best research I've done. I ate a lot while I was researching, and that was really a lot of fun. I have to say, if you're writing a book and you don't love the research, you're kind of dead in the water, because it has to really pull at your heartstrings, so to speak. So there's a lot of food in the book, there's a lot of family, there's a lot of Arizona, and there's a lot of secrecy, but I think that's what makes it fun. And I have to say, this book and my last book, which was called The Girl Made of Clay, the most rewarding thing is that people are starting to write me, and they're starting to say, gosh, after reading this, I think I'm gonna forgive my sister, or I haven't spoken to my dad in a long time, but now that I've read your book, I think I might want to try and do that. And I just am floored. When I started writing books, I really wanted to entertain people, and I wanted to make people feel good. I've been told my books are feel-good books. And that was all I wanted, honestly. And to have my story strike a chord with someone who just needs healing in their own family, gosh, it's just been pretty fulfilling. So anyway, that's the inspiration, that's the background. I would love to do Q&A. It's kind of my favorite part of doing these author talks. You guys can ask me anything. But thank you so much for listening. Well, I write front to back until an editor gets a hold of it and says, the mystery in chapter 6 should be in chapter 12. And then I rewrite the whole thing. So that's another thing, is editors, everyone thinks they're amazing. I fear them because they make me rewrite everything. Not the story, just the pacing,
Do you type or do you write your hand?
Oh gosh, I type. I write with my hand in a journal every morning, but I don't think that I could read my writing if I tried to write the book.
I have a silly surface level question.
Yes.
Did you pull those names because they're funny?
Oh, Julie and Ginny.
Ginny
I have a great Aunt Ginny, so I love that name. Her name's Virginia. And Julia, yeah, I did just because it sounded good together.
There's an olive in there too.
Well, olive, yeah, because it's food. Yeah. The chef has to have a daughter with a food name. All right, you guys, bear with me. I'm so sorry. Feel free to ask one more question if you want.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you find that your editor sometimes feels like you're glossing over a particular issue or problem and feels that you need to dig deeper, or that you don't have a true understanding of what it is you're trying to write about?
Yeah, you asked the editor, right?
Right, the editor.
Yes. So I have a slew of editors, believe it or not. So I have an acquisitions editor, is the one who signed me into the publishing house. And then she passes me off to a junior editor who's responsible for me until the book hits the shelves. And then I have a freelance developmental editor that's assigned to me for pacing, plot, and structure. And then I have about 3 copy editors, a proofreader, and a manuscript guru at the end. And I don't know all their names. And intern number 1. Okay, I found what I wanted to read. Okay, so this is chapter 9, and this is when Ginny first discovers Julia at her front door, and they haven't spoken in 3 years. And her daughter just took off, and she's got a supper club waiting in the wings. The words caught in Ginny's throat. Discovering her younger sister in her doorway had kicked up an unexpected tornado of grief and anxiety that swirled wildly inside of her. Standing speechless, she tried to unscramble the bizarre turn of events. First, Olive had stormed out. In her place, astonishingly, was her little sister, whom she hadn't seen or heard from in years. 3 long years of tension and resentment and silence. What exactly was going on? Her eyes searched Julia in disbelief. There was her sister, looking like she hadn't aged a bit, all polished and put together and expectant. This was real. It just made no sense. A burst of laughter, followed by the clinking of stemware, trailed out from the dining room. Ginny cringed and then threw an uneasy glimpse over her shoulder toward her waiting guests. Hastily, she whipped her focus back to her sister. "Aren't you going to invite me inside? What are you doing here?" Ginny's inquiry was delivered with an edge of accusation. She opened her mouth to ask another question, but then snapped it shut. She hadn't meant it to sound that way, but this was the worst possible timing for an unannounced visit, especially one that could be so volatile. She and her sister hadn't exactly parted on the best of terms. And now she didn't know how to feel, or what Julia wanted. "I came to see you, and Olive." Julia's voice croaked, and she offered a timid smile. "Surprise." Julia waited with blinking eyes. "I thought you might be Olive." "I think I just saw her driving away," Julia said. A manicured hand waved in the direction of the road. "Does she have a Jeep?" That was her. Ginny deflated. She swiped the tea towel that she was wearing at her forehead and then let it drop to her side. I can't believe she took off like that. She scanned the distance beyond Julia's shoulder. Fresh anxiety bubbled up. What was she going to do now? There was an entire evening's worth of dinner guests to wait on and no one around to help. Ginny couldn't afford to send anyone away. There was too much riding on the evening. Julia shifted, clearly uncomfortable. "Oh, well, hopefully she'll be back soon." "I don't know." Ginny felt the hope draining out of her. She studied Julia. "This is quite a surprise, but it's kind of, she wavered. One part of her wanted to grab Julia by the shoulders and pull her close, to pepper her with questions about why she'd come, to find out if Julia was sorry and if she'd finally come to make amends. But the other part of her, the practical and responsible side, needed to send Julia away before more damage could be done. There was an entire room full of customers, paying customers, waiting for her. Food was likely burning on the stove at that very moment. Sauces would be curdled, vegetables would go limp. Okay, and you'll have to read the book to find out if she lets her inside. Thank you, everybody.